true stories
that make us say,
wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
They brought cocaine out and I tried it. Almost like a superstition. I did it one night with some other teammates and then I hit 2 home runs. And then the next day I did it again and hit a home run and a double. And then I didn't do it the next night and I struck out 4 times for the only time in my career. And then they're like, well, you better do it again. And so I did it again and had another home run and a double. And then I said, at the end of the season, we'll do it. We'll stop. And then we won the World Series. And then, of course, it was party time.
Hi, I'm Rob Vischer. When I was a little kid, every time I shot a basketball in the driveway, it was a buzzer beater that won the NBA Finals. Every time I caught a football in my backyard, it was a touchdown catch in the corner of the end zone that won the Super Bowl. And every time I hit a baseball, it was a home run that won the World Series. Most little boys like me only dreamed of moments where we could win the world championship for our professional team. But in our first story, Scott Spiezio really has one of those moments. But then he finds out that the highs from even legendary moments don't last.
My dad had played in the major leagues for 9 years with the Cardinals, 64 through 68, and went to 3 World Series and won 2. And then he went to the Padres and then the White Sox. And in 1972, he was with the White Sox, and they weren't making very much money back then. So he opened a furniture store and would go to the furniture store at 7 in the morning. And then he would drive up to the park and play Major League Baseball and then head home. Yeah. And at the end of that season, he was only 30 and he decided, I'm going to retire. I was born September 21st to 72. His last game was September 26th to 72. I basically had a major league coach as my dad. So that's where, I started practicing a lot. My dad basically said, hey, you're either going to be a valedictorian or you're going to be a major leaguer. And I thought about it. And I said, I think I like the major league thing, but So he's like, you're going to work your butt off. We're going to set up drills in the basement. And when I come home from work, be ready to hit. And we had 2 mounds in the backyard and I'd hit in the backyard for hours. And on the weekends, we'd go to the field and spend 3 hours at the field, taking ground balls at every position and fly balls. And it was kind of an everyday job. He did make it enjoyable for me, but I knew it was work. He'd always say you can either, work hard now or work hard later. He made it fun. There was definitely times, where I was like, I'd see my friends swimming and stuff and, hey, do you want to come do this? And I'd say, I got to practice, It ended up working out, but it was tough. There was tough times. As far as pressure, when I was in probably like 15 to 16, I felt a little pressure because everybody expected me to be great. Yeah, so my dad was a very strict Catholic. I was raised going to CCD and, we'd be in Florida for vacation and we're like ready to go to Disneyland and my dad's like, okay, we gotta go to church. And I'm like, oh, come on, we're on vacation. But he would not miss. I went to many masses in my uniform. Yeah, faith was part of it. I believed in God. I knew the commandments. I knew certain things, but a lot of it was kind of rote memory for me. Even though I believed in Jesus and everything he'd done, I didn't really have that close personal relationship. And not until I got to college did I really feel like I can start going to baseball chapel. And I had some teammates talk about Fellowship of Christian Athletes and brought me to some things. And then I remember the chaplain saying, hey, if you haven't been saved yet, say this prayer with me. And I'm like, what, do I need to do that? So I started doing it. I kept saying it over and over, like each time. And then I started developing more of a personal relationship. That's where I started to grow as a Christian. I was still an infant at that time. I went to the University of Illinois for 3 years. That's where I was exposed to baseball chapel because we'd have double headers on the weekends. The chaplain would come out and do baseball chapel. And after that, I signed with Oakland A's in the 6th round. They didn't have a lot of money. If anybody's seen the movie Moneyball, I kind of lived that. And then they gave me a little bit more money and I went and I did well. And I moved up pretty quickly. Within 3 years, I was in the big leagues. So I signed in July of 93. By September of 96, I was in the big leagues. And I'd always pray like, God, keep me safe. Let me play 10 years in the big leagues. And I always say I should have prayed for 20 years because I got 12. So I went to short season A-ball. and I was only there a month. And then I went to Modesto, and my host family was the chaplain of the team. There, my Christian life started also getting better because he'd bring me along to go to talk to people in jail and schools and things like that. So I played through the Moneyball stuff, through the, negotiations, and the A's, when I became arbitration eligible, said, well, we don't want to pay you that much. And so they ended up letting me become a free agent. And that's when I went to the Angels in 2000. That's where I started really feeling my roots spiritually. And that's where I started getting the best opportunity to play. And I had probably my 4 best seasons ever with them. I worked my way from a DH that got about 300 at bats a year to end up everyday first baseman for the last 2.5 years into, a World Series champion. And everybody remembers, me for my Game 6 home run in the playoffs and 19 RBIs, which tied the record. It was a great environment. Of course, Southern California is beautiful, but there's a lot of temptation in Southern California. I had a group of guys around me, Tim Salmon, Garrett Anderson, Orlando Palmera, Benji Molina, Jose Molina, David Eckstein, and we had a great, Chuck Obremski was our chaplain. Those guys were like my posse. We held each other accountable on the road. If anybody was feeling vulnerable, we'd give each other a call. We had Bible studies on the road. Sometimes we'd have them during the week at the field. Sometimes the wives would come as well. The wives had their own Bible study with Chuck's wife. And that's where I really started reading the Bible a lot. And I felt great, even though I was dead tired. It was amazing. And then with that, man, then all of a sudden I went from a guy that was a pretty good player, in my area to now nationally I was known. I did the David Letterman top 10 list, and then I did the Leno show that same night, and I was on some sitcoms, and it was crazy. I went from a kid, like I said, to 10 people in my class, in a small town of, at the time, 6,000, 7,000 people, to now I'm in LA, and I got, I walk in to do this thing and there's paparazzi taking pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
And, people calling me up to do these shows. And finally, I was doing them all. I remember Carson Daly was calling me and I started telling people no because the whole off season I was just flying to New York, California, and I was based back in Morris, and it just got overwhelming. And then that's where I started getting off track. That's the beginning. I started not reading the Bible as much because I wasn't good at saying no. I was trying to keep everybody happy. I was always very involved with charity, but I was just, always doing the interviews, always doing the schools, always doing the hospital visits, all this kind of stuff. That's when I started being vulnerable. After the 2002 season, 2003, my whole goal was to win a World Series. Then I felt like I didn't have a goal. So then I had a goal to have a great year and sign a multi-year contract. Probably not the best goal, but I did. I ended up doing it. The unfortunate thing it was in a place I really didn't want to go. I wanted to stay in Anaheim, but they had made some internal decisions and my role was going to be cut in half. And my salary too, which I'm like, wait a second, I just had 2 really good years. I should be getting more. But for me, then I took the highest offer and went to Seattle. When I got to Seattle 2 weeks ago in spring training, I ended up having a freak injury on a pop-up to the mound. I hit the mound, my back jarred, and I remember catching the ball and turning to my shortstop, Richard Riley, and saying, man, I think I just blew my back out. And up to that point, I'd really never suffered a major injury. Found out that I had basically a car wreck injury. I had blown out my thoracic disc T6 and T7. The fluid was almost severing my spinal cord. Here I'm thinking, okay, I just signed a 3-year deal with a 4-year option on a new team. We've got some great players. I'm just starting to figure out how to play this game. I'm getting to be one of the top players offensively and defensively in the league. Now they're telling me I might not walk again. I might not play again. If I was going to play, we'd have to wait till June, take out a rib, collapse my lung, go in, put rebar in my back, and just hope for the best. That's when things started falling off the rail for me. Mentally, I just felt it was almost like a poor me thing. I felt deflated, man, I'm not going to be able to pick up my kids. And this is the game I love. I'm just starting to figure out this isn't fair. I just felt like, wait a sec, I've worked my whole life and I never even got to have any fun, started thinking of me and poor me. And what I did is instead of like listening to the big doctors that I saw in Arizona and California and stuff, I just kept going to a doctor until one of them would tell me that I could play. And finally, one of them said, as long as you can withstand the pain, you can play. I think your spinal cord's thick enough that even if more fluid come out, it won't paralyze you. Looking back, it was crazy. I ended up coming back, but before I came back, I was hanging around with the team. Now I've got a bunch of money. I'm not playing, so I'm not really worried about what I'm going to do. Like if I go out, it's not going to affect my play. I don't have my posse around me, my good, good group of guys that held me accountable. And then I wanted to fit in because I really hadn't found some good friends there. I hadn't really established roots there. I remember we were out of town and I was traveling with the team, working out with the team, but not playing. And I started going out, started in the hotel lobby, and then they'd end up jumping to another bar and then jumping to another bar. Before you know it, it'd be 3 a.m. And I'd never liked alcohol. I would drink here and there, but the guys that were with are like, here, try this, whiskey and Coke or Jack and Coke or whatever. And I tried it. And then all of a sudden, after a few weeks, I started liking it. It started becoming a part of my routine. And with that became someone that's not used to drinking. Well, even people that are used to drinking, when you start drinking, you're not yourself and you start making horrible decisions. And that's when my avalanche of horrible decisions started coming in. So I ended up coming back and playing, which I shouldn't have because it was very hard. I mean, I was in a lot of pain. I ended up pulling an oblique and trying to play through that. I still, during the year, ended up hitting 215 with 10 home runs and 50 RBIs, but it wasn't like what I was used to. I ended up having an affair and led to divorce and basically not having my 3 kids with me all the time. And then the whole guilt and shame thing started creeping in. And so my family, they tried so hard to, have meetings with me. I mean, my grandmas, my great aunts, my sisters, everybody would try to meet with me and talk me out of decisions I was making and try to get me back on the right path. And at that point, it was almost like I was too far gone in my own head. Instead of just turning back to God and repenting and throwing it all at his feet, I said, no, I can do this. I'm tired of listening to everybody else. I just kind of went off the deep end, and I was still able to play. It's 2005 and then ended up getting remarried to the girl that, I had the affair with, which was a horrible choice. I remember, having a meeting with my parents and my whole family in Morris. And, I was crying when I left and I drove to this parking lot in Morris and I was sitting there and I knew God was basically saying, here, listen to me. This is the way you need to go. If you go this way, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's going to be much easier. And this is the right way. If you go this way, it's going to be bad. And I basically sat there and argued with him and said, no, I know I can make this, watch me, God. I'm going to make this work for you. I ended up getting released by the Mariners because, I'd become kind of a distraction. I really wasn't contributing. They knew what I was doing. My off field was more important than my game. And I really didn't have any true deep friendships on the team. And so they released me. I thought my career was over. I thought that I wouldn't make, 10 years in the big leagues, which was one of my goals. My marriage was okay, but that started degrading because we were both doing the same thing. When I got released, my wife she was from Southern California, so she used drugs recreationally. And after about a year and a half, and after I got released, we were out and her and one of my friends who I really didn't even know used from back home, they brought cocaine out and I tried it. It didn't really start happening then. That was the end of 2005. Around mid-February, I thought nobody was going to call me. The Cardinals called and asked, hey, we'll invite you as a minor league invitee to spring training. And I went out, got my hair cut, painted my soul patch red, and I went to spring training and I thought I'd get, number 90. I ended up getting 26, which was my dad's number. So I was able to start refocusing that year because I thought, this is my second chance. Even though drugs weren't a huge thing in 2006, towards the end, they started becoming a thing, almost like a superstition. I did it one night with some other teammates, and then I hit 2 home runs. And then the next day, I did it again and hit a home run and a double. And then I didn't do it the next night, and I struck out 4 times for the only time in my career. And then they're like, well, you better do it again. And so I did it again and had another home run and a double. And then that was like the end of August. And then I just kept doing it like every night, but it became a superstition. And then I said, at the end of the season, we'll do it. We'll stop. And then we won the World Series. And then, of course, it was party time. Go to Aruba, go to Vegas, go, all over the place. And I just became a different person. 2007, it became like I needed it as soon as I woke up and the whole day. In order to function and not shake, I had to have it around me, especially the alcohol around me all the time. After that season, I got into a wreck. Thank God I didn't hurt anybody. Police came after me. I ran, hid, and the Cardinals came to me and were like, what's going on? And I said, here it is. I went to rehab. Actually, I went to the Cardinals in 2007, in August of 2007, and basically said, I've got an issue. I don't know how to deal with it. They tried to get me help. But I thought, okay, you go to rehab for 28 days, you're fixed. So I went to rehab. I came back that night. I started against Carlos Zambrano and the Cubs, went 1 for 3. I said, I'm back. Still thought I could drink. It ended up, that's not the case. I ended up getting divorced from the second wife. Jumped right into another relationship, kind of this codependent thing. It was almost like I always had to have somebody with me to feel like whole. I couldn't be independent and just have that close personal relationship with God. But I kept going to rehabs. I think it's 11. I did try to go to 1, but I got out of it. So technically, I guess I went to 12, but I completed 11 in 10 years. I knew statistically that each time I tried, I'd have a better chance. Even through that, I still didn't stop, and I started turning yellow. They told me, you got 20% chance to live. You're going to need a liver transplant probably, but you got to be sober for 6 months before you're even eligible to do that. And that's when I basically just said to God, all right, God, I'm done with this. Please take away my cravings. I'll do whatever you say. I'll let you steer. Just take away my cravings. The last drink I had was April 5th, like at 5:30 at night or something on April 5th, 2018. And then in the hospital is when I prayed, and from that day on, I never had a craving again. It's unbelievable because I thought for the rest of my life, once I got into that addicted thing, that I could never live without it. Both drugs and alcohol were going to be a part of my life until God took me into now when I go past the liquor store or I see like a bottle of liquor, it makes me physically ill. It's unbelievable. It's a miracle. I mean, I went from death's doorstep to having a new lease on life. They sent me to Northwestern to like a liver specialist, and they're like, when they first saw me, they're like, oh, well, let's just hold on here. Let's try to hold on for the next 6 months. We go in a couple months later, and they're like, I don't know what happened, but your liver is totally healed, and you don't need to come anymore. And the doctor even says, I don't know what happened. I can't explain it, but somebody up there's got your back. And then flash forward here, and I'm speaking in front of 3,000 people about my faith and what God had done in my life in a few short years. And it was just a magical moment because I had my dad there. I had my sons there. I had, pastors there. I had friends there. And after it was done, my dad stood up. He was bawling, gives me the biggest hug. And he said, I'm so proud of you. I started crying. I flashed back to a moment where I was in the middle of addiction and my alcoholism. And my dad, they would like bring me food and stuff to check on me, see if I was still alive. My dad was talking to me and he gave me this big hug and he started crying. He's like, I had a dream. I just know that God's going to use you in a big way. I know he's going to use you in a big way. And I'm like, thank you, Dad. I think so too, and it doesn't seem like it right now, but I think he is. And then to that moment, and I think that's the first time my dad realized that maybe my purpose wasn't baseball. He's like, that's what I thought it was this whole time. And I think it's something more. I think that God's using you. My liver was failing, all my organs were failing. And from that day on, he's resurrected me.
In our first story, Scott used drugs to gain acceptance and to psych himself out to perform better. In our second story, Jaron used something else to help him escape from the trauma of his new job.
My name is Jaron Lockridge. I reside from Jackson, Tennessee, and I would say my story is probably about how God just never stops chasing you. Growing up, I was always a part of a Christian family, but I would say I wasn't intentional with my relationship with the Lord. And just fast forward, I eventually got into filmmaking, and around this time, 2004, I don't have a lot of money. I'm not about to move to LA to pursue it. So I thought filmmaking was a far-fetched dream and ended up getting into law enforcement. And being in the law enforcement field was a very different thing to experience. You experience a lot of death. You experience a lot of people on their worst days. And it's very needed to find an outlet. A couple years into my career, I got back into writing. But another one of those outlets that I would say I started to form for various reasons was I would say a porn addiction to lust, and going that way to cover up a myriad of issues of just being in the job. That started it. I didn't even notice it was bad because a lot of people normalize it. It's just a cool thing that men do. Hey man, just do this. But it really started to get bad for me. And then later on in life, I get to a point to where I describe it as a faith crisis. Some answers come up in my life that I really couldn't answer. So that old question start popping in your mind: is God really real? Is all of this something that I was taught growing up, and just all of this and that, and I'm just following along? And so that little piece of doubt started to creep into my mind. And all along, like even looking back now, you see where God was still there as you're going through that situation. And I remember it like it was yesterday, where I'm getting off of work. I got this same routine together. And then I get off of work, and I used to love getting on YouTube and just looking at this lady in her swimsuit fishing. You know, it was like a wildlife video, her camping, doing things like this. And there was always this video on the side that was just totally out of place. Like it did not match with the algorithm of the rest of the related videos. So I skipped it for 4 weeks. I used to always notice it. Why is this video following me around? And one day I just said, you know what, let me check this video. And it was a sermon from preacher Philip Anthony Mitchell. And it sounded like that entire sermon was written for me. Like a lot of the stuff that I was going through in my life, a lot of the stuff I was struggling with in my life. And I remember feeling so convicted that night that I prayed, and it was probably the most sincere prayer that I've ever prayed. And I know my story is not going to be like a lot of people's, but that morning I woke up, it was just instant, like that lust, that porn, it was gone overnight. And that really, for one, confirmed, like when I asked God to reveal himself, that was God revealing himself to me, for one. And then I just started feeling this ultimate urge, which now I know is just from the Holy Spirit. You want to know me, you need to seek my word. So I started, that was the first time. One thing I had a real issue with, every time I tried to read the Bible, trying with the King James and that hard old English, I just could not stick to it. I would quit in Genesis every time. I don't think I would make it past the 6th chapter of Genesis before I just would fall off the boat. So that was a mission of mine, is just to know his word. And I was so hungry for his word that I found a translation that I loved that flowed well for me, which was the NIV. And I read the entire Bible in 6 months, prayed over that thing, researched over that thing, and learned his word for 6 months. And when I tell you that the power of just knowing God's word, that is the blueprint for life. Like all of your answers are in there. Even when you don't get an answer, it shows you how, like even the book of Job, when it doesn't make sense, that God is still there. So it's a lot in that word, which was there the whole time. All you had to do was be intentional with your relationship with him. And that was the best decision I ever made. And from this point, like I've been in filmmaking, I've been producing films since 2016, but I've never done faith-based, because even though I was doing something else, I always had this reverence of God that I didn't want to play with him and didn't want to do projects based around him, going back and forth, doing worldly things. But I felt that other conviction, like, you've been doing all this work worldly stuff. Like, now you need to use your talents for me. And that led to me producing my series House for the Broken, which meets people in a lot of those same places where I was. When you're dealing with struggles, you're dealing with doubts, you got family issues going on, and when that prosperity gospel or that perfect gospel that makes you think like being a Christian is just flowers and meadows, when you need a real word, when you need real encouragement, this is where that show comes in. And that's why I'm glad for like the church family that I found now, which is a small church in Jackson, Tennessee, the Gap, Jackson, and just finding community and having real people around you on this faith walk. So that's something that I would say is a story that meant a lot for me, is where just sincerely, once you have a heart posture to know God, he will always meet you right there in the midst of whatever you're going through. And he met me so strongly that it totally changed my life. And like, my walk now with him is so intentional, it's so strong. And where he left the hole from where that lust addiction used to be, like, he filled himself with that. So now when I usually would have that desire to go and click on a website and have no business being on, now I have a desire to read his word. Now I have a desire to get into apologetics. Now I have the desire just to know more about him and to also help people who were once in that same area in their life that I was. Yeah, that's, I would say, just God seeking me, being there the whole entire time. Like, I could just look back and see where little things happen, and now I understand why certain things happen. It was just him the whole time telling me he's there and just wanted me to seek him. And finally I broke down, and I did, and he met me right there in the lowest place I ever been. So yeah, that would be my encouragement for anybody. Just be relational, be intentional with your relationship with God. Don't be scared to ask him the hard questions. Don't be scared to let him know your frustrations. Psalms, Job, they all are a lot of laments in there. God, why are you doing this? Why is this happening to me? Spill it out, and you'll find once you release that, he'll give you a peace, like the scripture says, that surpasses all understanding. So I just want to encourage anybody out there. Hopefully my story encourages somebody out there that's struggling with something. Just give it all to God, turn it over to him, have a heart posture of humility, and he will meet you right there in the midst of all that.
Some little boys like me dream of being a professional athlete and hitting the game-winning home run. Other little boys dream of fighting for justice by becoming a police officer. What no little boy ever anticipates is being addicted to drugs or pornography. Adult life is way more complicated than what a child can foresee. But no matter what a little boy experiences when he grows up into a man, God can redeem him and give him a childlike heart once again. And that makes me say, wow, God. When I say wow, God, I mean the one true living God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's the one who makes my heart say,
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
My wow God story.
I wanted to share a wow God moment.
That's my wow God story. Praise God.
And I'm so thankful to God for this wow God moment.
So, thank you, God.